Okay, so yesterday we looked at the first few brachot in the middle of the Amidah. We spoke about the idea of wisdom and of repentance and forgiveness and then redemption. And then over on page 104, if anybody... No, never mind. Okay. No, it's fine, really. Don't trouble yourselves.
I'm only getting it to try and prove you wrong at some point.
Huh?
What page?
Well, we're very pluralistic over here. Whatever page you want it to be, it's fine. I'm on page 104, but you can really... Right?
Rabbi, on the bracha of the Refuenu B'Neirot V'Lashiach, usually there's a part that you save for Chayla.
Yeah.
What if you said that you finish it and then can you still?
Okay, we'll talk about it. Here, that's the bracha that we're getting to now. So let's have a look and see what the bracha is all about. We've got a bracha of refuah, of health and healing. Right? It's a very significant bracha. It's a very beautiful bracha. Rafenu Hashem v'nerafeh. Hoishenu v'nivosher, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be healed, we should be saved. Ki tilasenu ata. And then va'alei refuah shalem l'chom ha'kleisenu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give a recovery to all of the things that are ailing us. Ki kel melech Reuven emam v'rachmanota, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who heals everybody. Baruch Hashem Reuven chol yamo Yisrael. And we make the blessing who heals the sick of the people of Israel. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, one of the great rabbis from a couple of hundred years ago, asked a very simple question, very interesting question. He says like this: there's a concept when making blessings. There's a concept of making a blessing in vain. Right? What is making a blessing in vain? It's called tefillat shav. You take God's name and you make a blessing over something you shouldn't make a blessing over. So let's say, for example, you think you've got water in your cup, and you make a bracha Shaka Ling. In fact, there's nothing in there at all. Right? That's making a blessing in vain. Ask Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, it's a very simple question. He says like this: if somebody has a terminal illness, right, or somebody has, let's be a little less morbid, somebody has a chronic illness, he says, how is it okay to pray for them?
What does it mean, a chronic illness?
Somebody's got an illness that they're not going to die from it, but it can't be cured. So, for example, let's say somebody has diabetes or has asthma, right? These are things, Baruch Hashem, today medication is fantastic and it's possible to live absolutely normal, regular, 100% active lives, but a person will always suffer from that particular thing. That's all. So the question is, ask Rabbi Yonasan, again, somebody has a terminal illness, there's no cure. The doctors are saying, this person's got a certain amount of time to live and that's it, they're going to die. Ask Rabbi Yonasan, why is it okay to pray for that person? How can you pray using God's name? You hear the question? It's a question because, again, what's the problem? The problem is that you're taking God's name in vain because you're going to make a blessing over something which can't be done. Right?
Theoretically it can be done, God can do anything.
Oh, so theoretically it can be done, God can do anything, right? Which is, obviously that's the answer, right? That God can do whatever He wants, and that's why we're allowed to pray to God, even when things look bleak and it looks like it's not possible. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz like this: numbers are very significant. Right? In Judaism, numbers are very significant. The number 7 always represents the concept of nature, a natural cycle. When you've got a number 7 inside of something, you're talking about something which's got a natural dimension to it. I think we've spoken about it in the past. We've got the 7 days of the week, the 7 days of creation. The number 8 explains the Maharal is something which is represented by Lamala Min HaTeva. It's something which is supernatural. So a number 8 will always represent something which is beyond nature. Right? So the classic example of a number 8 is on the 8th day you do a bris milah, you do a circumcision, a brit milah on the 8th day, because there really is no logical reason why the Jews should still be around. There's no rational reason. They've been trying to wipe us out since the beginning, since Avram introduced the concept of monotheism and Nimrod decided that he wanted to bump him off. Since then, it's gone downhill. Right? And there is no reason. That's the famous essay from Mark Twain about why the Jews. Everything else has disappeared in little puffs of nebulous dust, and here we are, we're still chugging along. Why is that? Because we live in a dimension which is Lamala Min HaTeva. We belong to a dimension which is together with God and not being ruled by the physical laws down here. Right. Again, what does that mean? It means like this, that we do the bris milah on the 8th day because it represents the continuity of the Jewish people. Number 8 represents something which is lemala min hateva, something which is above nature. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibishter, this most beautiful idea. The bracha of Rafa'enu, the bracha for healing, which appears inside of the Amidah, is the 8th blessing. And he says, of course, that's the most apt place for it to be, because the number 8 represents that which is not tied down to the physical laws of nature. That's why we're allowed to pray for somebody who is terminally ill or somebody who is chronically ill. We can pray that God heal them because we don't belong to the natural cycle. Yeah.
I've got a really quick question for you. Let's say that someone he doesn't normally go to chakra, and a relative of his has recently become ill or whatever, and he goes and he says, do you know what? Until a certain point in time, until let's say he finds out that this person has an operation, right? No, I found out my grandma had an operation. It's supposed to be in February, and I said to myself, from now on, I'm going to go to chakra every day. I'm going to pray my Amida. I'm going to do that whole thing, and yet still no answer. So why? Why is it? If we're making one step towards him, why is he not answering whatever we want him to answer?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Why is it that we sometimes get the impression that God is not answering our prayers when we ask for specific things, and we're sometimes making great sacrifices in order to be able to, to see, to show God how serious we are about all of this, right? So, for example, getting up each morning to go to Shachrit is not an easy thing to do. And, so we want God to listen and to say, okay, wow, you're doing good. Here, you know what? Here, I'm gonna give you what you want. The problem with the thought process is that we're trying to second guess God, which means that it's true, we see things and we want things to be the way that we want them to be. So, for example, praying for somebody to be well, right? We'd like this person to become healthy. We don't want them to be sick, right? However, it is entirely conceivable that inside of God's plan, that there is a necessity for this person to go through what they're going to go through, and if needs be, also for the person to pass away as well. What the rabbis do teach, which I think is something, for me, I think this is something of a great comfort. What the rabbis do teach is that there's no such thing as prayer which goes to waste. Which means that even though I might be praying for a particular outcome for something and it doesn't work out the way that it was supposed to, nevertheless, the prayers, if they're offered up, sincerely, those prayers are definitely prayers of tremendous weight that are going to be used in a different way, possibly. So, for example, it's conceivable. A person prays that somebody becomes well, and the person doesn't become well, and in fact they pass away. But those prayers are now in the spiritual realms, are now being added into the merits that the deceased person has accrued over their life here in this physical world. Which it's impossible for us to be able to measure success and failure inside of our immediate existence over here. Yeah.
So is that's saying that any sincere prayer could be reused or recycled?
I think any sincere prayer can be used and utilized, just not necessarily in the way that it was originally meant for.
Okay.
There's a very famous thing. There was several years ago, there was a soldier called Nachshon Waxman who was abducted, and when the Israeli army went to try to get him back, there was some misinformation, and in the firefight that took place, he was killed. And in the up to the build-up before the army went in to try and release him, the huge amounts of prayers were offered up. Impossible to quantify the amount of chapters of Tehillim that were recited and prayers that were recited, and a non-orthodox reporter at the Shiva asked Nachshon Waxman's father, how's it possible that with all of these prayers, how's it possible that his son didn't come out alive? And that's what Nachshon Waxman's father said. He said it's inconceivable that all of these prayers have gone to waste. He said it's fine. They were offered up in order to save my son, but apparently they're going to be used to save somebody else's son instead. And I think that's the way that we need to look at sincere prayer, is something which is, if it can't be used, for whatever the reason, the divine reason, it can't be used for exactly what you recited the prayer for, it doesn't mean that the prayer has just dissipated and disappeared. Yeah.
It's kind of a lead-on question, but it's more about death. Can I ask it?
You can try.
Thank you. Like,
We like a bit of depth here, right?
What I don't understand is how, let's say, like, relatives pass away very close to very significant events in people's lives. Why is that? Like, why, for example, within our family, we've got 2 bar mitzvahs. I've got friends whose mother passed away recently, and they've got their wedding soon. Stuff like that. Why is that the case?
I don't know exactly. I mean, it's of course we're talking about things that have a divine flavour to them, right? Mm-hmm. Why people pass away when they do. There's been a lot of research that's been done over the years, medical research about people who are not well and are waiting for significant moments to arrive, and sometimes they make it and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the waiting is so much that it overcomes them, and sometimes they're able to get there until whatever it is takes place, and then they pass away afterwards. They did it. They did an incredible study in old age homes in America, Jewish old age homes in America, that apparently I don't want to use the word death rate because it sounds rather stark, but I don't know how else to say it. So the death rate after Hanukkah and after Pesach spikes. At moments in the year, right, in the Jewish year, where there's an awful lot of family events that are taking place and family gatherings, and elderly people are waiting. They're waiting for that, and they wait for the Hanukkah and they wait for Pesach. But after Hanukkah, and that's it. Now the family gathering. So very often people pass away. You know that the rates are higher at that time in the year, post Hanukkah and post Pesach, than they are beforehand. Why does it work like that? So I think again they were trying to work out the concept of anticipation, that a person waits and waits, and they have that, and now there's less to look forward to. Why do people sometimes pass away before significant events? I don't know. You know, sometimes you've got people are holding on and holding on. They're trying their best. They really are. My grandfather passed away. He passed away a week before his grandson's bar mitzvah and 2 weeks before his second grandson's bar mitzvah. And he was very not well. And the doctor said that you could see that he was trying his best. He really was. He was trying to hold on. He wanted to be a part of that, the celebrations, and he wasn't able to make it in the end. His body couldn't do it. Why is that? I don't know. Again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his calculations for everything. What Rav Yonas Nabishitz is saying over here is something really very beautiful. Why is it okay to pray for people who are sick? Because we live lamala min hateva. We, the Jewish nation, we live above nature. We're not part of the natural cycle per se, and it's perfectly okay to pray to God to perform a miracle which is medically not something which is going to happen, but it's okay to do that. That's not called taking God's name in vain. And says Rabbi Eiveshitz that that's the reason why this is the 8th blessing in the Amidah, because the number 8 itself represents the concept of being lemala min hateva. There is a extra blessing that can be put in if you know somebody who's not well, right? There's an extra blessing that can be put in over here. It can be added in before the blessing is before the actual blessing comes to an end. And you say, that you're asking that my God, the God of my fathers, right? Which means that again we're about to ask for something which maybe by ourselves we don't have enough merit to ask for it. We're tapping into that concept of zchut avot, of the merit of the forefathers instead. That you should send a complete recovery from the shamayim, from the heavens. Very interesting lashon. Refuas hanefesh or refuas haguf. that you should a healing of the nefesh, of the soul, and a healing of the body. It's a very interesting way of defining, right? Somebody is not well, so we understand when somebody is physically not well that they need to have a recovery. They need to be given a recovery from whatever they've got. But we never realize that if somebody's not well, that it's got a spiritual dimension to it, which apparently precedes the physical dimension, right? Refuas HaNefesh or Refuas HaGuf. In the olden days, sickness was a manifestation of a spiritual ailment, which means if somebody didn't feel well, it was because there was something in their spiritual lives which wasn't quite right? Some kind of imbalance. we don't hold like that anymore. There is an interesting, the Ramban Nachmanides actually writes that if somebody is a tzaddik, if somebody is completely righteous, then they shouldn't go to a doctor, but rather they should try to work out why they've been hit with the sickness that they've been hit with. What's the problem? Normally, apparently, if we're talking about a completely righteous person, presumably whatever ailment they've got is going to mirror the spiritual dimension, which means, I don't know, if somebody breaks a leg, so maybe they used their legs for the wrong things, right? They went running to the wrong places. I don't know, right? However, today we don't hold like that, which means that if a person gets sick, you should go to a doctor. But you should know that if you go to the doctor, you should know that it's really, all of this is coming from some kind of a spiritual source. Right? And a person shouldn't just look at the physical dimension and say to himself, okay, I'll take my antibiotics and then I'll get well. But a person should also take a look at the spiritual dimension as well. Are you finished? Is that?
I apologize. Maybe I did something wrong, so I'm sick now.
Actually, the Gemara says that the only thing that is to do with nature is getting a cold. That's to do with heat and cold and being hot and going out into the cold and being cold and going out into the heat. That's something which is that's something which you have to look after yourself. The Gemara says you need to look after yourself, and that's not to do with some kind of a divine. You don't say to yourself that obviously I used my nose for the wrong thing, which is why it's all stuffed up now, right? That's,
what about the flu?
I think the flu is really just a glorified cold, actually, if you ask me.
Can be very. I mean, people used to really die of the
Yeah,
flu,
for sure. But again, I think it's the origins of the flu. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know, but I think I'll have to speak up a little bit, because the origins of the flu are really cold related.
No, totally different virus.
Oh, okay. So maybe the flu doesn't count then. So maybe it's just maybe it's talking about a common cold, perhaps.
I mean, they're both viral infections, just like some other more serious diseases are also viruses. So why does it make a distinction? I mean, can it be that maybe you're too active or something? I mean, there's got to be,
What, getting a cold?
Yeah,
a regular cold,
right?
Yeah, that's what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying that there are very basic physical reasons why people might be getting a cold.
But they're the exact same reasons that somebody would get a flu or something even more serious.
So I don't know here. You say I don't know.
From a medical perspective,
yeah,
they're exactly the same reasons.
Not necessarily true. If you weaken your immune system by going out in the cold, then your body's more susceptible to those viruses. Maybe the flu would fall into the same category.
Right. Well, along with other viral infections, if you weaken your immune system, you're also going to be more susceptible to measles and all sorts of diseases.
Possibly, I don't know. I don't know.
Diseases that otherwise, according to Judaism, would be considered divine retribution for something else, or some sort of lesson that is trying to be taught.
I don't know. You don't need to look into it. See if there's any kind of a differentiation between something viral and something. I don't know.
I mean, can't it be that maybe you? You could. In hindsight, you could come away with some lesson from it. You could say, for example, that maybe even something as simple as this is God's way of telling you not to go from hot and cold really fast. I mean, maybe that's got some sort of Kabbalistic,
Possibly.
Thing,
it's possible. I mean,
there's
I
a lot
think
of things like that.
I think the idea of a cold is that it's something which is just so incredibly basic that you should be careful when you move from extreme temperatures one into the other. You need to be careful about how you do it, and whatever. It's you know what? I need to think about it. I never really thought about the difference between viral and bacterial. I don't know. All I know is that when doctors tell you something is viral, that's like a rabbi telling something is Kabbalistic. It means they haven't got a clue. That's what it means. They haven't got a clue, right? It's like, it's viral. It means, well, why have I got it? I don't know. It's viral. It's like so what can I do? I don't know. It's viral. It's the same idea.
Rabbi, if you finish write the whole Amo Yisrael, and you forgot, and then you remember, let me say, can you say the Yecharatzim before?
No, you should say it. You should add it into Shema Kolenu. Right, later on. Just one last thing over here, which I think we did touch on this, I can't remember when, but it says over here, the end of the blessing, when you're making a special blessing for somebody to get well, so we ask for a fuas and nefesh and fuas aguf, that the person should have a recovery of the nefesh, of the soul and the body, and then lechoyle or lechoila, depending on whether it's a man or a woman, for the sick person, and you say the person's name and their mother's name. I think we spoke about the other day, right? This idea, under normal circumstances, when you give your name, so you normally give your name and your father's name. So, for example, if you're going to get an aliyah, you're going to be called up to the Torah in shul, in the synagogue. So you get called up according to your name and your father's name. Over here, we're using the mother's name. Why is that? Because the mother has got the concept of compassion. Within, with the mother, it's something which is much deeper, and we're tapping into something which is going to be of a greater help inside in the heavenly spheres. When you use the mother's name, it's using the maternal compassion, which is going to hopefully have a greater impact in the spiritual realms. If you don't know somebody's name, just on a practical basis, if you don't know somebody's name, you don't know their Hebrew name, so just use their English name. God knows who you're talking about, right? So,
So why even say it to begin with?
Because your Hebrew, what's the pshat? The pshat is like this. Your Hebrew name is that's really who you are. That's your essence. That's your identity. There's a very fascinating idea. The word neshama, which means a soul, if you take away the externals, which are the nun and the hey, you're left with the word shem, your name. Right? Your name very much defines who you are in spiritual terms. It defines what your function is here in this world. So if we can use the Hebrew name, your Jewish name, then of course it's going to be more effective. But don't not pray. I'd say you need to pray for somebody to get well. Don't not pray because you don't know his name. Right? So
just have it in mind. God knows what's in your mind. Why specifically say the name?
I've often wondered. I mean, God knows what's on your mind. Why say the name? Because I think the idea is like this: that when in prayer needs to be verbalized, right? So the more defined the prayer is, the more effective it's going to be. Which means that when you come and you pray for somebody to get well, you've got to say it out loud. If you use the person's name as well, you're adding a greater definition to the prayer, and it will be of a greater importance. It will have a greater impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So back in the community, back where I live, it's actually Portland, but
You don't call that living, do you?
no, because I don't live there.
Okay, good. There you go.
In the community there, if you're a convert and your father isn't Jewish, whenever they make your aliyah, they say your name bin Abraham.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, would it be the same if you were praying for your mother who's not Jewish? Would you?
You would say Ben Sarah. Yeah.
Ben Sarah?
Yeah. Yeah, a convert, it's interesting that for conversion inside of Jewish law, when a person converts, it's as if the spiritual connection between the parent and the child is no longer there. And that's why the child is now called after Avram Avinu, who I guess is the first convert, right? The first convert in history. And if you need the mother's name, so you say the son or the daughter of Sarah instead.
Do they have kibbutz? Oh, sorry.
Huh? Kibbutz Avim still exists.
For them?
Yeah. It's like a technical thing over here, with regards to how the child is supposed to relate to his biological parents. A child who converts, right? So how they're supposed to relate to their biological parents. They're supposed to respect them, and the concept of kibbud av v'em exists, of honoring parents exist. But with regards to their spiritual connection, that's something which no longer exists, and therefore they're considered to be ben Avram or ben Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Rabbi said that if you're praying for someone who's sick, you use the mother's name because that evokes like the mercy, like the maternal mercy. And if prayer is all about, like, let's say this person deserved it or didn't deserve it, and then we're praying like to try to give them some kind of merit or whatever, then why does it matter if we're invoking maternal or paternal? This is all like judged out. It's like all.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. If somebody is has got what he's got because that's what he needs to have, then the question is certainly very valid. It surely shouldn't make any difference whether you use the mother, whether you use the father's name. If, however, a person can be sick, and one of the things that will alleviate the sickness, will remove the sickness, is that the person needs some more merits in order to be able to, in order to become well. That's what's the problem over here. The problem over here, what's stopping the person from becoming well right now, is that he's lacking some merits. That merits can come through the prayers of other people, with the added dimension of the compassion of the mother. Which means that in a situation like that, it's very significant whether you use a mother, whether you use a father.
Why?
Because the mother, that's going to add another dimension of merit onto what it is that's being recited already.
And we're all talking about what you deserve and what you don't deserve, and what merits you have and what merits you don't have. As in, like, if you're doing a good thing, like you do a mitzvah for the person, then you're giving them merit, and that will make them become better. What's the difference if you do it in a maternal way or a paternal way? It's still.
So I don't know. Again, I think the pshat over here is like this: that it says that up in the Shemaim, in the heavens, the maternal compassion is something which has tremendous impact. Right? There are a few proofs that are brought. One proof that is brought is that Rachel was buried in Bethlehem. Right? She wasn't taken to the cave of Machpelah and buried over there. And Yaakov explains that that's what God told him to do. Later on, after the destruction of the first temple, when the Jews were being sent out into exile, they stopped at the grave of Rachel Imenu, of Rachel, and they poured out their hearts and they cried over there. And Rachel came in front of God in order to try to alleviate the exile. It says, for example, another example of Shiluach HaKain, that when you send away the mother bird in order to take away the eggs. So it says over there, according to the Zohar, the most astonishing thing, it says that the mother bird flies up into the air and is busy, squawking and complaining about what's happened over here. And the angels come to God and they say to God, how could you allow this mother bird to have her eggs taken away? And God says to the angels, I don't understand. My children are in exile and nobody is crying for them. Why are you coming and complaining about this? Why aren't you coming and asking me to end the exile? And then it says that God, it decides that he can't rely on anybody except for himself, and then he begins the process, hopefully the process that will lead to the final redemption. What's the idea? See over here, we're talking in spiritual terms, that the mother adds a dimension over here in the spiritual realms, adds a dimension which would be missing if it was using the father's name. Do we see the difference down here? Not necessarily, right? But we're talking about something which has got a spiritual impact that gives it a significance greater than if you were to just use the father's name. Like I said, if you don't know the mother's name but you know the father's name, use that. Right? Don't not pray because you're not certain what somebody's name might be. Yeah.
About the media in general, when people pray, they sometimes do they treat it as like an exercise class. So how should one be when they say their media?
In what way? What are you talking about?
Like they use their hand, they make noise. It's the most annoying thing.
Yeah. So you could use your hands too whilst they're doing it. You could give them a couple of slaps and hopefully that'll put them back on track. Yeah, there is a concept. People do tend to become somewhat active when they pray the Amida. It's what's called Shaka Ling, which is Yiddish for swaying backwards and forwards. That's still this side of okay. Some people get very enthusiastic, and the Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva, when he used to pray the Amida, he used to start off in one corner of the room and end up in the other one. And he was in such a state of ecstasy that he wasn't even aware of the fact that he was, moving around somehow. I always say like this, we should, when you pray the Amida, the Arizal, right, one of the greatest Kabbalists who ever lived, the Arizal used to say like this, that before a person begins to pray the Amida, his thoughts should be, V'ahavta l're'echa kamoicha, that you love your fellow man like yourself. One of the things that we learn inside of the Amida is that except for the final paragraph, everything is in the plural. Which is when we pray for all of these things, we're not praying just for ourselves, we're praying for the whole of Klal Yisrael, for the whole of the Jewish nation. So if you say to yourself, after Recha Kamoicha, and then you start praying and you start making all kinds of noises and you start squawking around and waving your hands like a deranged emu or something, then it's you're distracting other people. I don't think that's really taking other people into account. I really don't. So I always tell people, you've got to do what you need to do in order for you to be able to concentrate on what you're doing. Right? So swaying backwards and forwards helps people very much in their concentration. Some people prefer to stand completely straight. I do think that if you're doing anything that's going to impact on the person next to you, then you shouldn't be doing that, even if it's going to come at the expense of your own intent.
If it does happen, can one move during the Amida? For example, if someone passes wind and stuff like that, are you allowed to move?
Well, passing wind is not quite the same as waving your hands around like a deranged emu. If a person passes wind during the Amida and there is a smell, then the best thing to do is not to move, but to wait until the smell is dissipated and then to continue praying from wherever you stopped. Now that's
so the prayer stops if it smells in the room.
Yeah,
everybody stops, acknowledges it. That's unreal. Everyone stops praying, acknowledges, we have to stop, wait for the smell to dissipate, and then keep going.
This is more of an individual, not the
Here, what's the chapter? First of all, don't misunderstand me. That's from the people who are davening, right? From the
That
person.
is incredibly embarrassing.
No, first of all, nobody knows who made the smell.
True, but still, I mean, it's kind of a thing that usually people don't acknowledge, and they just keep going with what they were doing before.
What's the problem? The problem is like this. You're right? But what's the problem? The problem is that it's forbidden to pray when there are, I don't know what you want to call them, bathroom smells in the vicinity. The same way that if, for example, the sewer was to overflow, and so then you wouldn't be able to pray until they took care of the problem. You wouldn't be able to pray, which just reminds me of a bit of graffiti when I was in school. In the bathrooms in the school, it said "Flush twice. It's a long way to the kitchen." That was I don't know what reminded me of that, but whatever. So what's that? We've got a technical problem over here. What is the problem? The problem is that I can't pray if there's a smell like that If there's a smell like that in the room, I can't pray right now. If a person feels like they are the one that are going to make the smell, right? Up until now, we've dealt with the people who have to smell the smell, right? What about the one who actually created that fragrance? So for them, they should stop there before it becomes something real. They should stop their recitation of the Amida and they should step outside in order to be able to pass wind outside and not to bother the people inside of the room. Simple as that, right?
So is it okay to move in the middle of Amidah? Let's say for any reason. Like Rabbi Akiva, was he doing it for Amidah?
He was doing it, he was unaware of the fact that he was doing it. He was so completely absorbed in his prayer, he had no idea what he was doing. Under normal circumstances, you shouldn't move.
So if someone's sitting there going like this during the meal, like I had it the other day, he was going like this, literally like this, and I thought he was about to punch me at various points in time.
I don't know why he didn't.
No, exactly. I don't know if that was actually, if you put him there to do that.
But I think so. I think is that the person, let's say, I'm using your example, that possibly you were not concentrating into your Amida. the world, it could be explosions going on.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, there's
I mean,
definitely.
why would I want to be?
I don't know. Can you move? No, you shouldn't move. You should manage to finish up the Amidah the best way that you can, and then at the end, take the fellow aside and say, "Listen, I'm sorry, but it was very. You know, I'm sure that you were prayed with tremendous, you know, with what's called kavanah, right? With tremendous kavanah, but it was very, very distracting.
Well, you should start swinging too.
In the hope, you know, in the
Like some wars, bro.
They tell over a story, you know, going back 150 years in European history when there was a tremendous battle that was going on between what were known as the Hasidim and the Misnagdim, the people that were against the Hasidic movement. And the Hasidim were very active and very vocal in their prayers, and the Misnagdim used to pray very quietly. And they tell over a story about somebody, a Chassid, who came to a Misnagdish, a shul, and he's davening over there the Amidah, and he's shouting out, and he's clapping his hands, and he's banging his head against the wall, and and so finally the people go to the rabbi of the shul and they say, "Rabbi, you know, can you say something?" So the rabbi says, "Look," he says, "if he's doing it l'shem shamayim, right? If this is really the way that he manages to pray well, then more power to him. And if not, I hope he gets a headache from banging his head against the wall." So I don't know. You got to be. We got to be very careful. I think Rav Moshe is right that very, very often. I'm not critiquing anybody over here. I'm just saying that very often when we're bothered by what somebody else is doing, if we were concentrating a little bit more on our own prayer and a little bit less on their prayer,
but it's the
then
hardest thing to do.
Of course. And sometimes it bothers. It bothers like.
No?
Huh?
There's a reason why you put it.
One of the reasons why you put a talit over your head, right, is just to block out as much as you can, right? I mean, if you people were to pray the way that you come here to class, then I think it would be no problem at all. You just need to block out everything over here. I mean, everything I say anyway. That's no.
I try.
Well, what did you say?
Sorry?
You talking to me? It's a. They did. I don't remember if I told you this, but they did the most incredible skit. Purim time. So they have, or the yeshiva always has an evening where people make little skits, and they sort of poke fun at themselves and a little bit at the yeshiva. They're pretty funny sometimes. And there was a guy who came. This is going back years and years, and he had this. What you hear is a recording of what he's thinking whilst he's praying. And it starts off with him bowing down very low, and he bangs his head on the table. And the first thing you hear from the recording is, "Ouch." And it's like a 10-minute monologue. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And he's looking around. He's saying, "Oh my gosh, look at the way he's doing that. I gotta learn how to sway like that." Once he's got like a movement like that, and oh my gosh, he's behind me, which means that he's praying slower than I am. I gotta slow down. And it was absolutely brilliant. The idea was brilliant because, however ridiculous the things he was saying was, I think we all fall into that trap from time to time, maybe even more often than that. What was the funniest bit of all was at the end, he takes his 3-step backwards, and you hear him saying, okay, 1, 2, 3, left, right, center. And he says, "Wow," he says, "that was great. Now, if only I could learn how to say the words." It was a very I think it was a very, very clever little skit. But we got to try. It's hard. I know it's hard. But if you see somebody who's praying and he's making a little bit of noise and he's doing rather weird things, but it seems that he's doing okay with his prayer, then I think we should try to let him be. Let him pray. Again, if it's really distracting, afterwards take him aside and say, "Look, it was very interesting watching you pray. It really was, but it was very difficult for me to be able to pray." Yeah, it's probably very revealing, right? Right, the way that a person prays.
I was told that when you're doing the Amidah, especially, you're standing in front of God like as if you're standing in front of the king.
Yeah.
Right. So is it proper to go like this in front of a king?
It is sweet. Is it okay to do like? You know what? No, of course it's not, right? I mean, you don't have people coming to the Queen of England, right, to get knighted, and you see them like this. You don't see that. And like, Nebuch, she's got this sword and she's trying to dub each side of the shoulder and she ends up chopping his head off because he moved too quickly or something. That's not the way it's supposed to be, for sure not. We're talking it's a spiritual dimension, which means if I truly believe that doing that is going to elevate me spiritually, it's going to help me to say the words in a better way, then I guess it's okay to do it.
It should be a sign saying, warning, do not sit next to this person then.
Yeah, maybe. The truth is you don't really need a sign because after you've done it once. So I'm saying like this, I think that was the moral of the story, right? If the person's doing it at Shem Shemayim, so leave him alone for sure, goodness me. If the person's doing it because he thinks that that's what needs to be done, because that's what he sees other people and he wants to do it even better than them, then that's whatever. That's a problem.
Well, the way somebody prays is that there's no halacha to it, right? It's open to interpretation or tradition.
Yeah.
So if certain people pray a certain way, I mean, it's not like you could say that your way is better or whatever. If as long as they're genuine and sincere and they're really doing it, then I don't see any problem with it. Even if they do sway, maybe our particular tradition is for that prayer to be like as if you're before a king, and so you have to be all proper and they might.
I agree.
They have a slightly different tradition. It's the same religion.
Yeah, I agree with you. The next bracha after health is a bracha of wealth. Now again, the chronology is very telling over here, because health is more important than wealth. It's wonderful to have wealth, or so I've been told anyway. It's wonderful to have wealth, but if a person's not well, then their wealth is okay. Maybe it's going to help them. It's going to make their lives a little bit more comfortable. But the health is more important, and it's a very fundamental idea of refuah and then birchas hashanim, that we should have a year of prosperity afterwards. They tell over a story about a chassid who came to his Rebbe, and he says to him, Rebbe, he's got so many problems and he needs to marry off his children and he's got debts and he's got this and he's got that. So the Rebbe, would the Rebbe pray for him to be prosperous, to be successful? And the Rebbe says, of course, how much do you need? And he says, listen, I'm not a greedy man. I don't know, $10 million should do it. So the Rebbe says, no problem whatsoever. And as the chassid is walking out, the Rebbe calls him back and he says, just 1 minute. He says, just tell me again, if you were drowning right now in a river, how much money would you need? And there's a few moments of silence, and the chassid is lost for words, because, of course, very often the most precious thing we've got it already. We don't even realize. Kodesh Baruch Hu gave us our bodies. He gave us our health. we need to be thankful for what we've got. If our Kodesh Baruch Hu gives us wealth as well, and we know how to use it, and we know how to utilize it properly, then for sure that's a tremendous blessing. But not more than the blessing of the health itself.
Why is the bracha Hashanah Hazot?
Here,
Why
Baruch Aleinu, Hashem Elokeinu es Hashanah Hazois.
Why not today?
Because prosperity, in Jewish terms, the truth is in economical terms as well, today is not so important, right? You've got to look at what is a prosperous year. A year that's had enough rain, a year where there's been crops and there's plenty to eat. Here, but it's saying over here, it's teaching.
So why?
I think it's teaching us a very important lesson over here, which means like this: you don't necessarily have to have a prosperous day in order to have a prosperous year.
That's true.
Right? Which means that you can have a bad day. You could lose a lot of money today. But in the greater picture of how your year looks by the time you're finished, you'll see that it's been a very, very good year indeed. Right? And I think that's also a very fundamental idea over here of not measuring material success according to right now. Right here, how did the old adage inside of the world of commerce is that in order to make money, you've got to spend money. Right? Now that seems like an illogical thing to do, because surely the more money you save, the more money you've got. But very often in the world of commerce, if you want to sell something, the more you spend on advertising, the more you'll be able to sell. The better you make your product, which means the more you spend on the product itself, the more people are going to want to buy it. Which means that today may be a bad day because I get my advertising bill, right? And I've got to pay tens and thousands of dollars to the advertising company. At the end of the year, when I'll look back and I'll see that that's a drop in a bucket compared to the amount of money that was generated from the sales after the advertising blitz. So we say to God that He should bless this year, Hashana Azot, that culminates for Tova, that we all of the crops, again, even though we're less connected to the fields than we used to be, we are a completely agricultural existence, bless you. Which means that if there's a good year, if there's good crops, then prices stay low, there's more money in the economy to be generated with buying other things. If there's years of drought, then the price of staples go up, and at that point, other things are not being bought instead. Bless you.
Thank you.
So we want a bracha, we want the bracha should be given on the crops, a bracha that should be given al pnei adama, on the ground itself. V'sabeinu mituvecha, and we should be satisfied. Now it's interesting, that's a separate concept in and of itself.
Mituvecha, from your goodness?
Yeah.
Is there a specific
Look,
way
listen.
why it's put the goodness?
We heard you. We
Third
know
time's
you're.
the charm.
We know you're here.
Third time's the charm.
May you be blessed with health and then wealth.
You've been listening.
That's right.
In between the sneezes.
Is there a reason why it says mituvecha? Sorry.
Yeah, because the goodness of God is not going to be measured in quantity, but rather in quality. Which means it's possible to be satisfied from something, a little of something, right? And it's possible to be satisfied by a lot of something. Now, it's a lot easier to be satisfied with a little, right? Which means, for example, there are certain foods which are very rich. You only need a little bit to be able to feel. You feel full, you feel great, you enjoyed it. It was a wonderful experience. Other foods, you need more of it in order to feel that sense of satiety, right? Satiation. Thank you. Huh?
Is it pronounced satiety?
Satiety. I think it's feeling full. Okay, you feel full. So certain things you need a lot more of it to feel full than you do in other things. Over here, the idea of sabenu mituvecho is that we should feel satiated from the goodness of what it is that we're eating, not necessarily the amount, but it's so good that we're only going to need a little bit in order to feel full. And this year should be a good year like previous good years. And then we say, Baruch atah Hashem avarech hashanim HaKadosh Baruch Hu blesses the years. We're going to stop over here on that upbeat note. We should all be blessed in Mitzvah Hashem with health and with wealth in Mitzvah Hashem. And we'll meet back here tomorrow.